My name's Andrew Walton. I run a website called Bioregion Birmingham, which I set up about 18 months ago. And basically, the fundamental concept is that we could reorganise ourselves to meet human needs using resources that are available to us regionally and locally. It's the most fundamental concept. But the way we get there is to use community, democracy and ecology to reconnect with each other and reconnect with the natural world in order to do that. I thought we could start with a little game. If you can tell me where these items have come from, which country, then you can have it. And I've just bought it from the supermarket, so it's fresh. Okay, so I've got here some basil, which you can grow in this country. So where do you think this basil has come from? Put your hands up. No. No.
Israel.
France?
No.
South Africa.
Closer.
Morocco.
No.
India.
No.
Australia?
What was that?
South America?
No. Shall I put you out your misery with this one? And that means I get to keep this one. This one's from Ethiopia. Basil from Ethiopia, which you can grow on your windowsill. Okay, the next one is some nice tomatoes, baby plum tomatoes.
Israel.
No.
Spain.
No.
Morocco.
No, sorry.
Egypt.
No.
Chile.
New Zealand.
No. I'll put you out your misery on this one as well, because I'm going to keep this.
It's only because tomatoes and basil go together.
Just need to get some mozzarella. These are from Italy. And obviously we can grow those in greenhouses. We could grow them in the summer and preserve them in some way, so that we've got access to them in the winter. And finally, definitely out of season, strawberries. So, sorry, again, guess where you think these have come from?
New Zealand.
No. No. Somebody's already said this one, that's a clue. Morocco.
Can we have one?
Okay, so,
It's a mix.
okay, means you get to keep on.
Sorted.
No, if you want a strawberry, then help yourself.
Yeah.
I'll open these up and you can have a strawberry. Okay, so basically, what does this demonstrate? This demonstrates, to some extent, how little food sovereignty we have. And food sovereignty is basically having the power to produce your own food as a community or as a locality. Now, 40% currently of the UK's food is imported from all around the world. So you think about the amount of energy expended in order to get our food, just to get it to us, never mind actually producing it. In 2013, we imported more than 440,000 tonnes of brick in order to undergo the construction that builds houses and properties and whatever else it is that we build in this country. We import £3 billion worth of construction materials every month. Again, this isn't something that we should just accept as, business as usual, because actually we could produce a lot of the fibres to construct low-impact properties ourselves. So what happens when energy prices rise because of fossil fuel scarcity? Or how about a breakdown in diplomatic relations, which history has shown us can happen? According to the Association for the Study of Peak Oil and Gas, the peak of oil discovery was passed in the 1960s, and the world started using more oil than was found in new fields in 1981, which is when I was born. The gap between discovery and production has widened since. Many countries have already passed their peak, suggesting that the world peak of production is now imminent. Currently in the UK, 70% of the total energy consumed comes from oil, gas and solid fuels such as coal, while renewables account for just 5% at the last time I checked. Assuming that we choose not to pursue nuclear for ecological reasons, which seems pretty sensible to me, there'd be a huge gap in energy production once fossil fuels begin to run out. And actually, countries have to announce their own figures for how much oil production that they have, or how many oil reserves they have. So we can only take them at their word, really, and that means that we don't actually know how much fossil fuel is actually left in the world. In the UK, transport is responsible for the biggest use of energy, accounting for 37% of all energy consumed, closely followed by domestic use at 32%, with industry making up 18%. And I'm assuming that that probably excludes the amount of energy that we're using for our military operations as well. Now, a good example of what happens when this kind of thing happens, in Cuba, when the Soviet Union collapsed, basically they were relying on a lot of their food from the Soviet Union was being imported, and they had to think very quickly about how they were going to produce food because the Soviet Union couldn't provide it to them anymore. And what they ended up doing was going to small-scale local farming, which, according to some of the reading that I've been doing, is actually the most productive farming methods per square metre in the world. For some reason, there's now fear that with diplomatic relations improving with America, they may start to incorporate the model that America's got for farming, which is far less sustainable, producing far less nutritious food. But let's hope that doesn't happen. So in answer to that question, something like this happens. In Acox Green, it made national news because there was a gentleman selling gem lettuces for £50 a dozen, and that was in response to crop failures in Spain about a month ago, meaning that people couldn't get gem lettuces or iceberg lettuces. And rather than thinking, oh, okay, should we eat seasonally or eat something else, there was hysteria, people thinking, where am I going to get my gem lettuces from? So that could be a glimpse of the future if we carry on the trajectory that we're on at the moment. So, how can a bioregional approach help us? Well, okay, so bioregionalism is the principle of meeting human needs within the constraints of resource areas. And that means if we want to approach food production, for example, in a bioregional way, we've got to look at what resources we've got available to us in our locality, across the region, what water harvesting we have available to us, what kind of nutrients are in the soil, all of that, to start thinking about how we might start producing food ourselves and build some kind of resilience into the way that we live. If we want to have a bioregional approach, that means we could produce food, fibres and medicine to increase self-sufficiency. And that means putting an onus on becoming producers rather than being consumers. If you look around the centre of Birmingham, it's very much conducive to us being consumers. Most of what comes into the city has not been produced here, by my reckoning. One of my favourite examples of a crop that we might want to produce to do this is hemp. It's non-psychoactive, it's legal, hemp. Now, prior to legislation, I think it was around the 1940s and 50s, that outlawed the production of hemp. Many things were made out of hemp, paper, that they built, they made rope for ships out of hemp because it's more resilient than cotton. All kinds of things. You can eat the seeds because they're high in protein. I think they've got almost all the amino acids that your body needs. And as you can see from this diagram, there are many things that we could utilise hemp for. I wouldn't necessarily encourage that we go to a monoculture approach, just have fields of hemp, but we could think of innovative ways to produce hemp and other fibrous plants that we might then want to use to produce a lot of the goods that we need in this locality, whilst also creating jobs, I suppose, creating new, greener industries. This is something that we could look into. Hemp provides 4 times as much paper per acre than trees, and it grows in a fraction of the time, taking just 1 season to reach maturity. So it seems like it's a bit of a no-brainer there, that maybe we could be looking at other ways of producing a lot of the things that we need. Basically, there's research that's come out recently as well that suggests we have something called an endocannabinoid system, and that our body has endocannabinoid receptors throughout it, which means that our body actually needs some of the compounds that you would find in hemp. So not only would we be meeting many of our needs in terms of producing goods, but also there are many health benefits to something like hemp. That's just to give you one example of one plant that might be useful to us. Obviously, there are thousands of plants that we could make use of to improve our health and to build a new kind of, I hesitate to use the word industry, but I suppose that's where I'm going with it. So thinking bioregionally means inviting nature back into our lives. A good fact, having 10 more trees in a city block improves how someone rates their health by a level comparable to an increase in their annual income, according to scientific research. Trees also provide shelter, they fix soil and they increase biodiversity. They're great for birds, they regulate temperature. They are also very good for absorbing water, so it would solve some of our problems with water leakage, for instance, leaching of any of the things that are good in the soil away from it. This is an artist's impression of a biophilic city. It was produced by artists on the request of the Chinese government, because currently they have a big problem with air pollution, and so they're looking at solutions to air pollution. And one of those is to create biophilic cities where you've got living walls and roofs. You're producing food, you're producing oxygen, cleaning particulate matter out of the atmosphere. And generally, I think that just looks like a much nicer kind of vision for a city. I'll say biophilic. A biophilic place is somewhere humans can make connections with nature and other forms of life. Birmingham is recognised as being a biophilic city and one of only 6 in the world, believe it or not. But that's largely as a result of its green spaces, for instance Sutton Park, which is massive and within the boundaries of Birmingham. But obviously, if you look around the cityscape, it doesn't look like that, and that's maybe a vision that we could aspire to. Would you just put your hands up if you'd like to live in a city that looks a bit more like that? Yeah, that's good. So a key word here is resilience. And what we're striving for is a city that's able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions. So going back to some of those scenarios I was talking about at the start, like running out of fossil fuels, diplomatic relations breaking down. If we have a more bioregional approach, the idea is that we would be more resilient to it as a region. Even if we didn't need to worry about these issues, a bioregional way of life encourages communities to work together to create a healthier, greener, more fulfilling way of life. And Felipe is actually going to do a talk after me about food forests, which is one of the key ways that maybe we could start to become more resilient and also encourage nature back into urban environments. So I recommend you listen to Felipe. And you might be sitting there thinking, yeah, but like, what can I do to try and embrace this vision? Well, one thing that I've been doing is managing a food forest project of my own in conjunction with Felipe and volunteers. You see Ranjit's got his spade out
Yes,
there.
that one spade.
And Kate. been helping me pot up some plants. One of the things you could do is get out there and see what community events are happening, what community projects are happening, and see you can get involved with starting to become a producer rather than a consumer of food. This project is in Bordersley Green, and I'm always on the lookout for volunteers, so if anybody would like to come and get involved, learn a bit more about forest gardening. I'm very much learning as well as the project evolves. But it is good fun planting trees, as Ranjit will tell you, isn't it?
A lot of fun.
And get to see those trees grow and then start to produce food. Like that I think that is a very fulfilling kind of activity. Other things you could do is cycle more, including clothes. I read a brilliant story the other day about a community somewhere in the Midlands, I think, where somebody had set up a repair shop, and what they were doing was getting community members to bring in old radios, TVs, phones, clothes, you name it, and they would be repairing them. And they'd also have a cup of coffee while they were doing it. And that means that we're not needing so many resources to constantly upgrade things that work perfectly fine or could work with a bit of fine-tuning. And obviously there's a lot of inbuilt obsolescence in a lot of the goods that we have. So it's about trying to be a bit more conscientious as consumers, I suppose. Spend more time in nature and learn from it. There's nature reserves all over Birmingham, some really nice parks, or you might want to go further afield and spend time in our national forests. And I think that has a very healing effect on the body and the mind. Share your skills if you're good at crafts, if you know how to produce food, if there's anything that you think you could add, where you could add value, and you have the skills to share, then get out there and start sharing your knowledge with people. And I think a big thing of mine at the moment is, if you can, trying to think about, like, do I need to earn as much money in order to sustain this lifestyle that I've got? So one of the things that I'm trying to do is reduce the amount of money that I'm spending and to become a bit more conscientious as a consumer. And that means then that hopefully I might have to work less as well. And if you speak to a lot of people, I think a lot of anxiety, a lot of illness comes out of the kind of work that we're having to do at the moment. So having a bioregional economy would hopefully create more meaningful civic roles, more meaningful jobs for people. That's again something that we could aspire towards. That's roughly a very quick run through of how I would view bioregionalism. And I'll just leave you with this quote, which is used a lot by bioregionalists around the UK. And I'll read it for the benefit of the camera. There is no wealth but life, life including all its powers of love, of joy and of admiration. That country is the richest, which nourishes the greatest numbers of noble and happy human beings. And on that note, I'll close. If you've got any questions, then ask away.
In the photograph of the green city, what were the red bits on there?
The red bits.
I think they look like
I think they're just like access points, really. It's just the paths from what I can make.
Walkways, looks
Well,
like.
there might be roads. I don't know. What's brilliant is you've got the sky lifts here at the top of all the peaks. So what a way to get around the city that would be. And there's no reason why we can't think outside the box like that and be a bit more innovative in the way that we create our living spaces. I think that's what that shows.
Did you say you set up this bioregions, or have you set up a group?
Oh, sorry, I should have promoted actually. I've got a website called bioregionbirmingham.org.
Okay.
And what I use that website for is to get different people from the community to share their knowledge and skills. So it's not just me talking about bioregionalism.
Yeah.
I'm getting input from across.
Bioregion.
Yeah, there's like a manifesto for bioregionalism there, and then if you scroll down, you'll see that there's news articles from different contributors. For instance, an idea that's being floated at the moment, if you go down a bit, is the Birmingham Pound. So one of the lady that is the spokesperson for that group, really, she put a little article together about how we might make that happen. And I think they're having a meet-up later this month if anyone's interested. You can get more details if you come onto the website.